Hi everybody, I've been spending a little time down here playing with the TIG welder, seeing how that works, and also trying to teach myself TIG welding. So let me start by saying those of you who followed the series where I worked on the airco and getting it all set up for TIG welding and was having problems with the high frequency start, I was going to remove the TIG torch leads and the ground lead and just hook up a small wire and kind of put a gap so that basically I would have the high frequency output not being bled off by, say, a bad torch cable or anything like that, just to see how intense the high frequency would be if I did that. Because I figured if I did that, then I would know for sure that it's more of a problem with the high frequency being bled off somewhere in the TIG torch cable or something like that. What I ended up doing was, just for the heck of it, the other night I was down here and decided to play around with it, and I did a couple of things differently. I turned on the shielding gas, which I hadn't been doing in the last series of tests. I also used this piece of junk metal that I had laying around. This is actually, looks like it's probably galvanized sheet metal, but it's fairly clean compared to some of the metal I've been playing around with. What I discovered was that by using a cleaner metal and the shielding gas on, I don't know if that's, if each of those things helped a little bit and then combined, but the high frequency actually seems to be working pretty good, actually. I don't have to touch off at all. It's not a scratch start situation. The high frequency is definitely making the jump and initiating an arc. So at this point, even though it doesn't seem to be making the kind of high frequency that I'm hearing from other people out there, like Scott, if you're watching this video, you had mentioned how much of a high frequency jump you get when it's set at 50%, which I forgot what you had said, but it seemed significant to me compared to what I'm getting. And then I neglected to ask whether or not you were using an air-cooled torch, because my thought was maybe what I'm experiencing here is fairly normal for a 25-foot water-cooled torch, which is what I've got. Long story short, we're going to jump into talking about learning about tungsten sizes, tungsten types, and a few other little details that I picked up along the way. So for those of you who are who know a lot about this stuff, this is going to be hopefully redundant, because that would mean I'm getting it right, and quite possibly boring, but you probably might also have tips or things you'd like to mention or your own experiences, because the thing I found is, even going through the trouble of looking on forums, going to websites, looking up information, watching videos of experienced welders, I'm seeing information from one person to the next that isn't all exactly the same. There's little differences here and there. I watched, those of you who have watched this series, TIG Time with Mr. Tig, I forget what company he's sponsored by. I think it might be Longevity. If not, I apologize. But anyways, the point is, you guys probably have seen these videos of this guy. He's got a lot of good information, but it was interesting because he was, in one video I watched, he was answering viewer mail and answering a question somebody had posted in the welding forum on his, I think his website is weld.com, and he gave some answers. And then I watched another one of his videos where he talked about that subject again, and the answers weren't the same. They were very close, but they weren't the same. So I thought, well, maybe he sourced the answers from two different spots or something. I don't know. And all it was amperage. So, like, I wrote down some notes, and then I watched another one of his video, and I wrote down the note, and I looked at my notes, and I realized, wait a minute, that's not the same. And we'll get into that momentarily. So let me get some stuff set up here on the workbench, and we'll take a look. First, let me show you this mess here. All right, so here you can see where I was, this is no filler metal. This is just running the torch along, trying to form a puddle, playing around. Obviously got a little bit too hot there, punched through. Started to get a little bit better at it here. You can see I'm learning how to control that puddle a little bit better and move the torch along. You can almost see this like a cleaning action. It practically completely removed this galvanized coating and left behind fairly clean sheet metal, actually. The back side, you can see the heat was baking off. I think again this white crustiness is the result of the galvanic coating being cooked off. And then I even started to play around with a little bit of filler metal. I have these little strips of some sort of a copper alloy, by the looks of it, filler metal. I just happen to have these, and there's no marking whatsoever on these, so I have no idea what this is. So this is that filler metal I was just showing you. I've just got a few pieces of it here in this little box. This box was actually, this came with my cabinet of tooling and accessories that when I bought my Wells Index milling machine cabinet was included, and then I found buried in the cabinet, I found all these little welding goodies, because it turns out the ESAB TIG welder that they had there, which in retrospect I wish I had bought, but anyways, hope the air code didn't hear me say that. The point is that I think, based on evidence of things I found around there when I was looking around, that the majority of the work that they were doing with that ESAB was actually aluminum. Let me get this filler metal out of here. And we can start looking at some of these. So there's actually a lot of tungsten sitting in here. All right, so I just took a minute to sort out all of these tungstens and tungsten pieces that I found in that box. Apparently these guys didn't believe in throwing too much out. Some of these are pretty used. So, new tungstens, when you take them out of the package, they have a color code on the end. And the color code actually denotes the type of tungsten that it is. Its formulation, what it's made up of. Now there's two standards, ISO standard, and then there's the, I forget what the other standard is, but there's another like world standard. Most of what I'm going to talk about should conform to the ISO standard for labeling of these tungstens. Tungstens contain really two parameters: their size measured in diameter and their chemical makeup, so to speak. So there are pure tungstens, and then there are tungsten alloys. Now there are a lot of different size diameters of tungstens out there, but for the most part the four standardized sizes that you're going to encounter the most out there are going to be the 1/8 inch, which is this here, 3/32 of an inch, which are these here, 1/16 of an inch, which is this here, and 0.040, 40 thousandths, which are these thin ones here. And here's a comparison side by side. So 40 thousandths, 1/16 of an inch, 3/32, and 1/8 inch. So the tungsten is acting as an electrode to create the arc. And the idea is that we want tungsten to be able to sustain the heat generated by this arc without just melting and disappearing. So at some point, the heat generated by the arc, the intense current flowing, will start to break the tungsten down. So the chemical makeup of the tungsten can affect how well it can withstand the tremendous amount of heat and current. But more importantly, is the diameter. So it goes without saying, you take one look at this little thin 40 thousandths tungsten, and you can see that this is not going to be able to handle as much current as this 1/8 inch before it starts to give up the ghost. So you might ask, well, then why don't you just use an 1/8 inch tungsten all the time? Well, the problem with that is, well, two problems. First off, an 1/8 inch tungsten is going to have a very large arc or plume created. And if you want really pinpoint accuracy in your welds, if you're doing very small parts, very small fine repairs, that's not going to work. The other problem is, whereas with like this little 40 thousandths over here, you can actually get an arc with really low amperage and keep a very small, tiny pinpointed area hot. If you try a very low amperage like that with an 1/8 inch electrode, you're going to have a very hard time even getting it to light at all, never mind stay lit while you're trying to weld. So generally speaking, you really want to try and use the smallest electrode you can get away with for the job you're doing. Now, there's obviously exceptions to that rule, but what most guys, apparently, from what I've read, tend to agree on is that the 1/16 inch electrode, which are these here. Let me get these 40 thousandths, these tiny suckers. Let's get these out of here. So this size here tends to be the size that many guys keep for just all-around general small repairs. So let's talk about the current capacity that these different electrodes can handle. Should have talked about that before I took the 40 thou away. Okay, so I got my little cheat sheet here, and let's start with the 40 thousandths electrode. And the 40 thousandths electrode, for the most part, most people would agree that this electrode wants to be used at a maximum of about 70 to 85 amps. And some even say that even at 85 you're pushing it. And my understanding is that with some machines, you can actually strike an arc with as little as 5 amps with this electrode. We're talking the max. So again, 70 to 85 amps max. Well, we can look at another chart, and that's going to tell us that, okay, 70 to 85 amps is not going to give us much penetration on thicker metals. So obviously this would be, this is going to be your go-to for very fine, small repairs. And when I talk about thin metals, I mean thinner than a 1/16 of an inch. So next up the food chain is the 1/16 of an inch electrode. And a 1/16 of an inch electrode, it's like I said, it's considered a common go-to electrode for a lot of people. And this electrode can easily handle up to 100 amps. Scratch that. I said 100 amps, but that was actually, again, that was something I saw on one of the videos, and then later I saw that they actually talked about that being 150 amps max for a 1/16 inch electrode. And on the weld.com website, I've got a chart here for TIG welding parameters in mild steel, and that shows the current 100 to 140 for a 1/16 inch electrode. But you get the general idea that, you know, once you get out of the 85 comfort zone of this 040, you're going up to a 1/16 of an inch. And generally speaking, this diameter electrode with that current, you're going to be able to actually even push it up to 160. Your material thickness for mild steel up to 3/32 of an inch. Once you get above 3/32 of an inch in mild steel, say 1/8 inch to 3/16 of an inch metal thickness, then you want to bump up to the next size electrode again, which is going to be your 3/32. And these are going to run in the 125 to 200 amp range. Anything 1/4 inch and above, you're talking a lot more heat you've got to generate. So we're talking much higher currents, 150 to 300 amps. And that's going to be your 1/8 inch electrodes. But there are other parameters we have to take into account that are going to affect this. And as you may recall, I did mention chemical composition of the electrode. So let's talk about that next. Again, chemical composition of the electrode is denoted by these color bands at the end of the electrode. So the problem I have, for instance, is this is the electrode that I removed from that torch. This is the electrode that was in the torch when I got it. And lo and behold, I cannot see a band on here whatsoever, which means the band was probably on this end where they started sharpening the tungsten and using it. So I have no idea what the chemical composition of this electrode is. However, I do have a very strong suspicion that the shop that I bought this welder out of was predominantly using this welder for repair on aluminum castings. So I would not be surprised at all if this weren't a tungsten electrode more geared towards use on aluminum. So if this is a pure tungsten, which would have had a green stripe on it, like this here for instance, then these are great for aluminum, but they're actually not recommended for use on DC, on mild steel. They're made for AC aluminum. And for those of you who don't know, the reason why you want to use AC on aluminum is because the AC current, the alternating current, actually gives you a cleaning action that helps break up that very thin, very strong oxide coating layer on aluminum that you're trying to punch through. So another little dirty secret is that the advent of modern inverter type welders has resulted in a bevy of tungstens out there that are formulated and work well on inverter welders, but do not work well on older transformer welders like mine. So I need to be conscientious of that when I'm selecting my tungstens. Now, as luck would have it, I'm going to go through some tungstens that I acquired. They were in that cabinet, so whoever was using that ESAB welder was using these tungstens or had them laying around. I'm hoping that they're not all pure tungstens for aluminum. I don't see why they would be, because there are a lot of the tungstens here I see have red bands on them, and red bands are what are called 2%, what are called thoriated tungsten, which means they have a small amount of thorium in them. And the thorium makes them very durable. The only bad part about thorium is it's radioactive. So, I mean, it's not like crazy radioactive.
You've obviously never heard of cobalt thorium G.
Well, what about?
Well, let's see now. Cobalt thorium G. Radioactive half-life of 100 years.
It's not like I've got to worry about holding this in my hand. But I'll tell you where this can be dangerous is when you're grinding a point, the grinding dust goes airborne, and you do not want to breathe that in. So you got to be really careful when you're grinding. Well, when you're grinding any tungsten, especially a tungsten alloy, you want to take precautions. You also should use a grinding wheel. I forgot what type, but you should use that grinding wheel only for grinding your tungstens. You should have a dedicated tungsten grinder, so that you don't pick up any contamination, because stuff that you ground on the wheel previous to grinding your tungsten will be embedded in that wheel and then transfer into the tungsten, and you'll contaminate your tungsten. So this is a chart that I printed out off of the website weld.com. If you go to the weld.com homepage and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a you'll see it says additional, and if you click on additional, I believe there's a choice on there and it says something about charts or I don't forget what it says, but you'll be able to figure it out. Click on that, and you'll see there's all different types of charts you can. But they have one called the Global Tungsten Selection Chart. Okay, and this is something they put together, and there's a disclaimer at the bottom here about the information. And if you have a color printer and you print it out in color, this will actually be the different colors for the different tungstens. So you can see we've got quite a few different colors here. And the interesting thing is, this whole chart right here does not show purple. And the reason why I mentioned that I'm surprised that it's not on there is because a lot of guys swear by these E3 purple tungstens. They're good on transformer or inverter welders. Apparently they're good for up to 150 amps in the 1/16 of an inch size, which makes them a go-to size to keep on hand for a lot of guys. So they like the purple ones. I don't have any of those. So that must be a newer thing. So getting back to the chart here, we've got, just going to run down real quick. Okay, we've got red, which is the thoriated tungsten, that's the radioactive stuff. Green, which is no alloy, so that's pure tungsten. Blue, which is what's called lanthanated. Brown, which is zirconiated. Gray, which is serrated, lanthiated, yttrium, and others. So I guess that depends on the manufacturer. White, zirconiated. Yellow, thoriated. Gold, lanthanated. Orange, serrated. And black, lanthanated. And you're probably wondering, well, a lot of those had the same alloy, so what's the difference? Why do they give them different colors? Some of these, it's because the ISO standard and the not the American welding standard. AWS and ISO are the two standardizations that are used. So that's probably why we've got multiple colors for the similar alloys. You can go to the IWS, International Welding Society's website, and there's a lot of good information on there if you're a member, and even then you got to buy a lot of that information. The website, I found it kind of difficult and clunky to navigate, and when I finally did find the information I was looking for, they basically showed that they were offering to, if I wanted to pay, they would sell me this manual that would have a lot of technical mumbo jumbo in there that I wouldn't even be able to understand as a noob. So not really for the weekend warrior. But you go on a site like this, they take a lot of that information, they cross-check it with real-world experience, and they come up with a nice chart like this. And what they've done over here in this part of the chart is they've actually rated the performance of the different types of alloys based on whether it was on AC or DC, and whether on a transformer welder or an inverter welder. So you can go down these two columns right here, and you can quickly figure out which alloys you never want to use on certain machines. So the first one that pops out that's machine unique would be the brown, okay? And the AWS nomenclature for the brown is ERZR1. And the comments, they say it's AC welding only, so you don't want to use it on DC, and then it's got good toughness. But then when we come over here, we'll notice that they give it a 10 out of a 1 out of a 10. They give it a 10 for AC welding. So this is a very good tungsten for AC welding on a transformer machine. But when we come over to the inverter, look what they say, NR, not recommended. So they actually don't recommend it. And of course, it's no good on DC for either machine because it's for AC only, right? So this, if you get an older transformer machine, sure, great for aluminum. If you get a modern inverter, you don't want them. So when I go right down the list here and I look, it turns out that really there are pretty much almost every single one of these tungstens can be used on a transformer welder. Some of them should only be used on either AC, or some should only be used on DC, and not both. And then some can be used on both, but they work better for one or the other. But then when you go down the inverter side, there's actually a couple here that are not recommended for use on inverters at all. So it turns out modern inverters apparently are more finicky about the tungstens than the old transformers. And so when I look at the really popular ones here, red, they give it a 10 on either a transformer or inverter welder when used on DC. So that would be for like your mild steel. Okay, be an excellent electrode for mild steel. They only give it a 7 on AC for a transformer welder, and it's even lower, a 5 for AC on an inverter welder. And what they say is, it's got good toughness DC applications, but it doesn't maintain a ball for AC. So when you AC weld, you actually want to get the tip to ball up like this. What they're saying is it's, yeah, no good for that. And the next one down, of course, is green. Well, green, they're telling you, yeah, it balls up easily for AC. So they give that a 7 on the transformer welder. They basically say you don't want to use a DC on either one of the welders. So if this, like that, I don't know what it is. If this was a green stripe, then chances are it's not, because I didn't witness it balling up on me at all. So I don't think it's that. I don't know what it is. So I guess I should figure out what the heck I've got here for electrodes. So in that cabinet with all the welding goodies, there were these packages of electrodes. Let me start with these more modern looking ones first. So these are cheap Chinese made ones. They're made by the Welding Nozzle International. Tungsten electrodes made in China. They're 10 pieces, ground and annealed. And these are, remember what I said, red stripes. So these are going to be the 2% thoriated tungsten, which means they're going to be good on DC in my welder, anything you're going to weld with DC. So not aluminum. These are 3/32. Here's some, these must be 1/16 of an inch. Here's some 1/8 inch, some big. Here's some 40,000ths. Really skinny little ones there. So that's quite a bit of thoriated tungsten. That's good. These, Blue Demon, see, these are green. Remember what we said about green? Green is tungsten with no alloy in it. So these are not good for DC. These are for use on aluminum. They're going to ball up easily. It says right here, type pure, 1/8 inch. Save these for aluminum work. And also these are 1/8 inch. So these are for some heavy duty fabrication of aluminum, maybe doing castings too. Here's some 40,000th aluminum, pure, 1/16 of an inch green. These look like 3/32 green. These are 40,000ths. Well, these say 2% thoria tungsten electrodes, so these should be red, and they are. These are 1% thoriated tungsten electrodes. Okay, so because these are only 1%, 3/32, I would expect these to have a different color band. Well, I tell you what, there's nothing in here. This is an empty envelope. I guess we're never gonna know. All right, what's this? These are, oh, here's another package, 1% thoriated tungsten electrodes, 40,000. So these are really skinny little ones. These appear to be, well, they're either yellow or gold. Let's see if we can't figure it out by looking at the chart. So let's see, the chart says, well, yellow and gold are right down here on the chart. Yellow is thoriated and gold is lanthanated, so that must be a yellow band. And those are also AC welding only. Oh no, sorry, that's white. I went up too high. Sorry. So yellow is DC low amperage applications. So they give it a 9 for DC, a 9 out of 10 for DC on either a transformer or an inverter. And they only give it a 6 for AC. So yeah, those would be good for DC. Okay.